So back in 1993, with war absolutely raging in the former Yugoslavia, something happened that had never happened before. For the very first time, the International Court of Justice, we're talking the world's highest court, was asked to step in not after the fighting stopped, but right in the middle of it. This is the story of that incredible case.
Now get this, those words, they weren't from a politician or a reporter. That was the court itself describing the brutal reality on the ground in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This was never just going to be some dry legal proceeding. It was an attempt to use the power of law to stop a humanitarian catastrophe, and the stakes could not have been higher.
All right, so here's our game plan for unpacking this whole thing. We're going to start with the shocking accusation that put this case on the world stage. Then we'll look at the court's first try at intervening and why, well, it just wasn't enough. That leads us to Bosnia's second, much more desperate plea. From there, we'll dig into the court's really surprising final decision, get into the nitty-gritty legal reasons that kind of tied its hands, and finally explore the deep divisions this whole thing created among the judges themselves.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's March 1993. The brand new Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina takes this huge, dramatic step. They file a case against what was then the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which was basically Serbia and Montenegro.
And the accusation here was incredibly specific. Bosnia didn't just say, hey, there's a war going on. No, they alleged a violation of the Genocide Convention, arguing that Serb forces were committing these awful atrocities, and that Yugoslavia was the power pulling all the strings, directing them, funding them, and helping them out.
So things moved fast, right into an emergency phase. Both nations showed up before the court, and both were demanding immediate action. In international law, they call these provisional measures, which is basically a fancy term for an emergency injunction to stop things from getting any worse while the case proceeds. And you could see the core conflict of the case right away. On one side, you have Bosnia detailing this horrific campaign of ethnic cleansing and violence. But on the other side, Yugoslavia didn't just deny it. Oh no, they fired right back with their own counter-accusations, claiming that the Serb population was also a victim of genocide, that their people were being illegally detained and their churches destroyed. So in April '93, the court issues its first emergency order. It was a three-part deal. First, it told Yugoslavia, you have to do everything you can to prevent genocide. Second, and this was really specific, it ordered Yugoslavia to make sure any military or paramilitary groups it was backing weren't committing these acts. And third, it basically told both sides to just cool it. Don't do anything to make this terrible situation even worse.
But here's the thing. That court order, handed down from the peaceful halls of justice in The Hague, it didn't stop the violence. The war kept raging and the situation on the ground got much, much worse.
And things escalated quickly. Just a few months after that first order, even the court itself had to admit things were not getting better. So by late July, Bosnia was back. This time with a second, far more urgent plea. And wouldn't you know it, just 2 weeks later, Yugoslavia filed another counter-request of its own.
This time, Bosnia was not holding back. Their demands were way more specific and way more drastic. They asked the court to order Yugoslavia to cut off all support. We're talking weapons, money, training, the whole shebang. They wanted a court to forbid any plans to carve up Bosnian territory. And then came the real bombshell. Bosnia argued it needed the ability to get military weapons to defend its own people, which was a direct challenge to the UN arms embargo that was in place at the time.
So this really set the stage for a critical moment. The whole world was watching. Bosnia was pleading for something, anything more concrete, and everyone was waiting to see what the court was going to do next.
I mean, that was the big question, right? Would the court actually grant these new, stronger measures? Would it step in and effectively challenge the UN arms embargo? Could it fundamentally change the course of the war?
The court's answer was, well, it was stunning in how simple it was. It didn't issue a single new order. It didn't grant Bosnia's requests. It simply reaffirmed its original order from back in April.
And you have to hear the court's reasoning in its own words because it's so powerful. The judges basically concluded that the problem wasn't that the first order was too weak. The problem was that it wasn't being followed. What was needed, they said, was not more rules, but immediate and effective implementation of the ones they'd already made. So when all was said and done, neither side got what it was asking for in this second round. The court said no to all of Bosnia's new requests, no to ending military support, no to blocking partition, and no to weapons. And it also said no to Yugoslavia's counter-request. Which of course leads us to the biggest question of all, why?
Why would the court take such a limited, hands-off approach in the middle of such a horrific crisis? Well, the answer comes down to a really fundamental legal principle.
It all boils down to this concept called prima facie jurisdiction. Now, in simple terms, this just means the court can only rule on things it has specific legal permission to rule on. And in this case, Bosnia brought its case under the Genocide Convention. That treaty, and only that treaty, was the source of the court's power. It didn't have some broad permission to rule on all the general laws of war.
And what that meant was the court had to draw a really difficult line in the sand. It decided that issues like military supplies, the arms embargo, carving up territory, while all of that was obviously critical to the war, legally speaking, it was separate from the specific crime of genocide. So ruling on those things was outside its power. In a very real sense, the court's hands were tied by the law itself.
But don't think for a second that this was an easy or unanimous decision. Behind the scenes, the judges themselves were deeply, deeply divided. And all the while, the war, of course, just kept on raging.
I mean, just look at the final vote count. You can see the court was anything but united. Yeah, the majority reaffirmed the original orders, but there were judges voting no on every single measure. This was not a consensus. This was a fractured court.
You had some judges, like Judge Latterpath, who agreed with the final outcome but still wrote their own separate opinions because they had more to say. He wanted it on the record, loud and clear, that in his view, the process of ethnic cleansing absolutely is a form of genocide under the convention.
And then you had the outright dissents. Judge Terrassa, for instance, slammed what he called the court's one-sided approach. He saw it as a fratricidal war, a war between brothers, and he felt the court was wrongly putting almost all the blame on Yugoslavia when, in his view, all sides were suffering.
And maybe the most telling thing of all was this sobering admission the court put in its final ruling. Despite its legally cautious decision, it stated plainly that it was not satisfied that all that might have been done has been done to stop the killing. It was this stark acknowledgement of the huge gap between the letter of the law and the horrifying reality of the war.
And so, this case, brought right in the heat of battle, really put the entire international legal system on trial. It forced the whole world to grapple with an uncomfortable and, frankly, timeless question. What is the true power of international law when it comes face to face with the brutal reality of war?